Let's find out an every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. She's a clinical psychologist, treatment developer, parenting and trauma expert, book nerd, as well as a Broadway lover. None other than Miss Brandi Hawk.
Hi, it's so nice to meet you and to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Miss Brandy on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself? That I matters.
Absolutely. My name is Dr. Brandi Hawk. I'm a clinical psychologist. I work primarily with children and young adults. My specialties are in childhood trauma, chronic pain, and parenting, among many other things. I've developed a program called Parent Child Care, which has been evidence based, and I've trained people around the world in this brief 7 session intervention for parents and children to improve their relationships and improve behaviors.
Dr. Brandy, let's talk about today being you. But here on Abstract Essay, we celebrate you. We salute you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. Thank you. Thank you indeed. So you co-develop an evidence-based parenting intervention called Parent Cold Care or PC Care that is now used internationally. What is specific gap in existing parenting programs that you were trying to fill, and what the problem do parents keep bringing up that no mutual fully prepared you for?
That's such a great question. So, the first thing to remember is that all parenting programs at their core are kind of the same. We all teach the same things. There's no magic skills that one has that the others don't. But what research has told us over and over again is that the dropout rate for parenting interventions is extremely high. Of
Mm,
the families that even make it in the door for parenting support, at least half of them will wind up dropping out before they finish a traditional intervention. And so we developed PC Care to be brief so that families can actually complete it and they can feel accomplished. They can learn all of the skills and be able to say that they did something. And it's true. So typically there's about a 50% dropout rate. In PC Care, our research found that we had about a 10%, 10 to 15% dropout rate, which is significantly less than for other interventions.
mm. Well said, well said. Dr. Brandy, you've worked with children and families who have experienced trauma for about 15 years, including orphanages and foster care systems. What is the one thing that still surprises you about trauma shows up a child even after all this time?
I think every single case is a surprise, not because it's new, but because every single child that experiences trauma is one more child in the world that shouldn't have to experience trauma. And there's always a new story, it always hits differently. The specifics of the experience, as well as the way it impacts the family, the way that it impacts the child's school, their community, and all of these things are different for every child. I think that it's always surprising how parents respond, and that's typically the biggest difference from family to family. Excuse me, is that some parents are fully in on supporting their child and other parents are really struggling to understand what's happening. And so the thing that is always most surprising is the family relationship and the way that trauma impacts a family. And that's what we get to work on in therapy.
Well said, Dr. Brandy. You co host the Nerdy Psychology's Book Club podcast, where you use fantasy and dystopian books to teach psychology concept. Give me a concrete example. What does book like The Hunger Games or Harry Potter actually help people understand about trauma or parenting that textbook cannot?
Everything. So the thing about fantasy and dystopian novels is that they are always centered around trauma. And if you think about really any story, but especially fantasy and dystopian novels, we don't write books about people who have easy lives. Someone who is born, doesn't have any struggles, never experiences trauma, they don't have books written about them, or at least not good books. And it's only the people who have experienced something really scary and overwhelming and have to learn to overcome it that have books written about them. And every fantasy and dystopian novel involves a character confronting some traumatic experience, it having a huge effect in their life, and them having to figure out how to grow from that. And so we read a new book every month, and each week we talk about a different character and concept within the book. I'll give you an example. This past week, we've been reading So Let Them Burn by Camilla Cole. It's a book about dragons. I love it. And this past week, we talked about egocentrism in adolescence. A lot of parents, a lot of adults get so frustrated with teens because they're so quote unquote selfish. But really, that selfishness is a very normal part of development. And it has a name. It's called egocentrism. It impacts the way kids view themselves and the world. It has benefits for them, and it also has a lot of negativity and negative impacts for them. And so we're able to use this book to talk about the concept of egocentrism in adolescence. It allows people to think about their own adolescence a little differently and maybe to have a little more compassion to the teens in their life.
You describe yourself as a recovering people pleaser. How did the pattern show up in your clinical work or leadership, and what did your recovery actually require you to change about how you real life psychology?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I love to tell people I'm a recovering people pleaser. In fact, all five of us who own our business all are recovering people pleasers. I say recovering, not recovered, because, there'll always be a piece of that. But, growing up, I had a wonderful family. They're fantastic. But I was also a very high achieving child and got lots and lots of praise for accomplishing things, right? And so that starts to feel really good. You want people to notice the good things that you're doing, and you change the way that you behave in situations so that you get that positive feedback from people. And in some ways, that's really beneficial. It sets you on a good path to work hard and be liked and be able to get jobs and internships and all of these things. But it also makes you lose who you are. You start to question, like, well, am I doing this because I really want to, or because I want the positive feedback from the other people that I'm talking to or who are in this business or whatever? In the actual therapy room, it can be detrimental to therapy to be a people pleaser, because a therapist's job is not actually to make their client feel warm and fuzzy and happy all the time. A therapist's job is to help their client confront potentially some negative things in their life, either things that have happened to them or things that they have done or that they're going through. And if your goal is just to make people like you and just to make them feel good all the time, you'll never be able to do the hard work of therapy, to confront people on things that are hard and to have difficult conversations. And those difficult conversations are actually where growth happens. And so it's been a very slow trudge through my life trying to identify, is this what I want? Or am I just doing this because I think it's what everyone else wants? And then making a very conscious choice to do what I want, or to do not necessarily what I want, but what's going to be best for me, even if it's not what's best for somebody else.
Indeed, beautifully articulated. Dr. Brandy, you train providers internationally in trauma focused treatments. What is the most common mistake even well intentioned clinicians make when working with a traumatized child, and how do you correct it?
Oh, this is actually pretty easy. There's two related main concerns that come up. The first is around exposure. So, in trauma treatment, one of the important components is exposure to the traumatic event. That doesn't mean going back in time, right, and being re exposed to it. It means talking about it, re exposing yourself to the memories of the traumatic event within the context of a supportive, caring relationship, and after learning skills to be able to manage your emotions. But research tells us over and over and over that the most important factor when we're looking at recovery after trauma is that there is exposure, that we're not avoiding it. And the more we avoid trauma, the more it perpetuates trauma and the more stuck we get in trauma symptoms. And so a trauma therapist needs to be willing to do gradual exposure, to expose people and sit with them in hearing about these traumatic events that have happened. And that feels very uncomfortable, especially when you're talking about kids. Therapists, especially new to trauma therapists, they don't want to make kids have to relive that. And so you hear therapists a lot say, I don't want to re traumatize the child by talking about this. And so they don't do the most important part of trauma work, which is exposure, because they're afraid of re traumatizing the child. And what we say to that is that talking about something that already happened is not traumatizing. Experiencing the traumatic event was traumatizing, but it already happened and it's already living inside that child's brain. They're thinking about it over and over and over again. They're picturing it. It consumes their mind. You talking about it isn't traumatizing. It's actually releasing and relieving. It's allowing them to get it out of their mind and share it with you so that they don't have to hold it all to themselves anymore. And so I'd say that's the number one biggest concern and the biggest thing that we have to work through with new trauma therapists. The other is related and it's getting started to begin with. It's the same thing of not wanting to push kids and not wanting to make them uncomfortable. And so therapists will spend 2-3 months in the rapport building phase, playing games with kids and just having fun before they get into the work. But those are 2 or 3 months that this child is still having to deal with their symptoms and they're still having to feel trauma symptoms all the time, when they're 2 months that we could have been working on reducing those symptoms and building rapport and building a relationship through openness, through connection, and through symptom reduction.
Dr. Brandy, you love Broadway musicals with
Do.
unnecessarily detailed knowledge. If you had to explain a key concept from trauma therapy or parenting using song from musical or you only a tool, which song would you pick and why?
Oh, no one has ever asked me that question before. Oh my gosh, that's so hard. How do you even choose? Um, Man, the song that comes to mind first, and I think maybe if I had time and like really, really thought about it, I might find a better one. But in the musical Rent, which is one of my absolute favorite musicals, after one of the main characters dies, there's a funeral scene. And there's a song that they sing at the funeral, which is actually a reprise of a previous song that I think is really beautiful. It makes me cry literally every single time. And it's a beautiful description of grief and how you can have this hope for something, this beauty and love in your life, and the loss of that beauty and love and hope is so deeply upsetting that it hits you down to your core. And it's not just that something bad happened, it's actually that this whole future that you had anticipated and longed for will never happen as well.
Well said, Dr. Brandy. You co-developed PC Care, which is evidence-based treatment, as we talking about a while ago. But you also host a book club, podcast, and funny and irreverent as well. How do you hold the tension between being a serious researcher and a person who loves to laugh and be silly, and those two sides have a conflict?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think it actually comes back to your question before about being a recovering people pleaser, because for a long period of time, I thought those two things had to be separate. When I went into work, I had to put the silly, fun part of me aside and not let anyone see that. They could only see the person that was 100% in it, that thought through every single thing she said before the words came out of her mouth, to make sure that I was only doing things that would be seen as positive and never silly or not great, right? Not professional. And as I let go of that, as I realized that that's not actually being a whole person, and whole people are more relatable, whole people are a better part of a clinic, they're better therapists than half people who are hiding half of who they are. That I brought my silliness in, that I would allow myself to just be myself with clients and to be myself with my colleagues. And that's when I started to form real relationships. And when I was able to connect with clients in a new way, and when I felt like I was actually showing up as my whole self. There's always a tension, right? Because you can't be super silly when you're at your job. And you don't want to be super, super professional and stuffy when you're doing something silly. But being able to feel and connect with both sides of yourself is important, even if you lean more towards one or the other in different situations.
Hmm. Well said again, Dr. Brandy. You have worked with children ages 0 to 18. You have experienced trauma. And what was the developmental difference on how trauma parents in a toddler versus teenager that parents or teachers almost always misinterpret?
That is a really good question. So, it is important to know that when a toddler experiences trauma, it looks very, very different than a teen. And the thing that's most important to know about young children who experience trauma is that they never experience it in a silo. Even if it's something that just happens to the toddler, whenever a parent hears about their child experiencing trauma, it is traumatic for the parent. And so you can't talk about a child's trauma without also talking about their parents' trauma. And especially for very young children, it's still true for teens, but it's especially true for young children. The parent's response is going to be the biggest factor in whether that child goes on to develop worsening trauma symptoms or is resilient and able to grow after the trauma. It's about how the parent responds to them, the warmth in their relationship, the parent's ability to regulate their emotions and to maintain structure and boundaries that are going to shift how that child responds. And so when we're working with young kids, we cannot just work with a toddler. We have to work with their family because the parent also needs to be able to process their trauma, and the parent needs to be able to support the child. Versus when you're working with a 17 or 18-year-old, you want the parents involved, but the work is a whole lot more with the child, with the teen, and what they're experiencing than when you're working with a toddler.
Dr. Brandy, to wrap up our discussion for today, you have worked with children who have been adopted or are in a foster care? What is the question that adoptive parents are often afraid to ask, but that you wish they would ask much earlier?
Oh, that is a really good question. Um, I think there's two pieces. One is before adoption and one is after. And before adoption, I think the most important thing for a parent to ask is, will this child, do I actually have capacity to give this child what they need, right? Do
Mm,
I live in the right place? Do I have the right supports in place? Am I happy enough with myself that I don't feel like I need to save this child, but that I feel like I need someone who's going to make my life different, that who's going to make my family whole? Because adoptive parents are not saving kids. They're providing a home for a child who's not able to live with their biological family. And those are two very different things. And they create a very different relationship as kids get older. It's important to remember as kids get older that they can love their adoptive family and mourn their biological family at the same time. And that's totally normal.
totally normal indeed. So, Dr. Brandy, can you please invite our listeners to support your podcast, your business, your projects, or anything you want to promote on Abstract Essay?
Absolutely. Please check us out. The podcast is the Nerdy Psychologist Book Club. We are on all the social medias. We are anywhere that you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. If you're interested in therapy or trainings, you can check out my website at redleafpsychology.com and see the upcoming trainings that we have. And I really hope to see everyone soon.
Yes, definitely. So, Dr. Brandy, I have one more question before I will let you go. If a parent listening or is overwhelmed or exhausted and worried they are already messed up their child's attachment and trauma recovery, what is the single most important thing you want them to know about children's capability to heal? And what is the one small concrete thing they can do starting tomorrow?
The thing to remember is that it's never too late to heal. It's never too late to decide to make a change. And the one small change sounds silly, but it's just spend 5 minutes every day playing with your child. Put your phone away, put your computer away, don't do dishes, don't do chores. Put everything away, get down on the floor, and let your child show you how cool they are. Be delighted and surprised by them and give them your full, undivided attention. That is what kids crave more than anything else.
Well said, Dr. Brandy, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
Monica people, see you soon.